In this round, I'll sort fact from fiction and discuss a more realistic version of events. Firstly, I want to end this idea of terrorist refugees. There have been no Syrian refugees in America that have been arrested on even a suspected terrorist charge, which shows that when there is a chance of doing proper security checks, we can tell who is not a threat and allow them a more secure life. Secondly, Ted Cruz is not a reliable source because he's a politician that has previously lied and exaggerated about the refugee crisis in an attempt to undermine Obama, so I don't trust any of his opinions. Thirdly, refugees are actually in fact not an American issue but a European one. This is what I've been talking about all along because they have flooded into Europe and it's impossible to send them all back, as my opponent appears to believe, because they will continue to live in Europe as illegal immigrants, which, as I mentioned before, has its own host of issues which cause more and more radicalisation. So, my plan is not actually unrealistic and I have specified what it is. This would be a European Union policy supported by the UN workers that are already within Europe. The number of refugees would be proportioned to the economic and structural capabilities of each country. The only plan with holes in it so far has been the status quo, and it's unacceptable. So, let's look at the Paris attacks. There was one person travelling with a fake Syrian passport who was undetected due to the lack of coordinated resources to deal with refugees. The rest were born, raised and recruited in Brussels and France. As I explained before, homegrown terror is more of a threat than terrorist refugees, and we only deal with this problem by tackling extremism within the Middle East. All you've shown with your argument about hate preachers is the extremist ideas exist within the Middle East, which is a true fact, but does not translate into all refugees keeping or holding these beliefs of terrorism and extremism. As I've shown, when we do proper security checks, we can whittle out those who do hold these beliefs and allow people who are safe to live a secure life within our country. The only way that we can deal with this is to implement my policy and to avoid the chaos that is happening currently. My opponent believes because we are so terrified of an unrealistic outcome of terrorist refugees invading the country, we then should condemn to death and warfare those who are civilians and children just because they were born in Syria. This is totally immoral and unrealistic. The next unrealistic argument is the apparent friendship between Russia and America. Russia is supporting the Assad regime and has been bombing rebel troops alongside Daesh. There is no coordination between the Western coalition because the West are also strongly against the Assad regime and have been for a long time. The reason IS managed to secure so much of Syria is because it has been torn apart by religious ethnic tensions, which most other Middle Eastern countries have taken a side in, meaning that there is no cooperation currently. Your plan to arm people is severely unrealistic. I mean, who is it you're going to arm in Syria exactly? The Kurds, the Syrian, the Free Syrian Army, the Assad regime, the civilians don't understand how that policy works. What we actually have to do is to create a mass international intervention that we cannot morally condemn civilians to experience. So what is the situation in Syria? Well, everyone is fighting on at least two fronts. First of all, we have the Assad regime supported by both Russia and Iran fighting rebels and Daesh. Second of all, we have a disjointed collection of armed rebel militias fighting Assad, IS and each other. And finally, we have IS fighting everyone, including murdering civilians. Now, what does an international intervention need to do? First of all, it has to break up IS supply lines and strongholds if it ever hopes to destroy that terrorist group. Second, we have to contain ethnic and religious conflict that sparked a civil war in the first place if we ever hope to have any type of cooperation for the attacks that we plan. And thirdly, we have to allow for a stable political resolution instead of a power vacuum which we've seen fails dramatically when it's left as is. None of this is a safe situation for civilians or for children, but it is necessary to secure the future and stability of that region. We cannot in good faith implement this without providing safety for the displaced civilians, as I have proven in the first round. It is utterly immoral to condemn them to this death and warfare, and we will not allow, or the Western nations will not be able to commit to the types of intervention that are necessary if they think they place too many civilians in danger.